An Amish man was still a virgin at 40 until a lost girl begged to stay in his barn during the storm. The wind howls through the Colorado highlands. A lonely lantern swings. Inside the barn, a quiet farmer mocked for his purity hears a pounding at the door. A girl, half frozen, gasps, "I'll sleep in the straw, just don't send me back." He gives her shelter, but nothing about this night is simple. Whispers spread through the valley. Elders warn him, "Cast her out, we'll lose everything." But the girl carries more than fear. She holds a secret deed, signed in blood and honor, that men would kill to steal. Now the storm outside is nothing compared to the fire closing in. A barn will burn, a town will turn. And one man must choose between obedience and mercy. Will this forbidden act of compassion cost him his solor? Give him the family he's prayed for all his life? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you. Make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The wind howled across the Colorado highlands, rattling the windows of Austin Lapp's modest farmhouse. He stood at his wooden table, the remains of a simple supper before him, tin plate with the last crumbs of cornbread and a few dried beans. The lonely meal matched the emptiness that had settled in his chest over the years. Austin gathered the dishes, his movements careful and measured as he washed them in the basin. The copper kettle on his wood stove sent wisps of steam into the air, the only movement besides his own in the quiet house. Outside, the storm grew fiercer, pelting snow against the glass panes like tiny fists demanding entry. Settling into his chair by the stove, Austin opened his worn Bible. The lamplight cast warm shadows across the pages as his lips moved in silent prayer. "Lord, guide my path," he whispered, his voice nearly lost in the wind's moan. At 40 years old, the weight of solitude pressed harder with each passing season. The sudden pounding at his barn doors jerked him from his devotions. The sound carried even over the storm's fury, desperate, urgent strikes against wood. Austin's heart quickened. Visitors were rare enough in fair weather, let alone during a blizzard. He reached for his heavy coat and lit the sturdy barn lantern. The metal handle was cold against his palm as he stepped out into the storm. Snow immediately stung his face, and the wind tried to steal his breath. The beam of light wavered as he made his way to the barn, his boots crunching through fresh snow. The pounding came again, weaker this way. Austin lifted the lantern higher, its light catching on a huddled figure pressed against the barn doors. A woman, her clothes dusted white with snow, her face pale and frightened in the golden glow. "Please," she gasped, her teeth chattering. "I need shelter, just for tonight." Her eyes darted past him toward the road to town, though nothing was visible through the curtain of white. "I'll sleep in the straw. Just don't send me back to town." Austin recognized her, then Nima, the young woman who'd appeared in their settlement weeks ago, trailing whispers and suspicious glances. Bishop Hochstetler's warnings echoed in his mind. "Keep your distance from the Englishwoman. She brings trouble with her. The proper thing would be to turn her away." His reputation, his standing in the community they rested on, following the ordained path. But as he studied her face, he saw only terror and exhaustion. Whatever her past, she was God's child, seeking refuge from the storm. "Come," he said simply, unlatching the barn door. The heavy wooden barrier swung open with a groan, and Emma hurried inside. Austin followed, raising the lantern to chase shadows from the corners. The familiar sense of hay and horse filled the space, and his draft horse nickered softly from its stall. Emma stood shivering, arms wrapped tight around herself, snow melting from her clothes to puddle on the packed earth floor. Austin hung the lantern on a hook and moved to the back of the barn, where he kept clean blankets for the horses. He returned with 2 thick wool covers, offering them without ceremony. "Thank you," Emma whispered, pulling the blankets around her shoulders. Her fingers were red with cold, trembling as they clutched the wool. I know I shouldn't ask this of you, but I had nowhere else to go. Austin nodded, understanding more than she knew about being alone. There's fresh hay in the loft, he said, pointing to the ladder. It will be warmer up there, away from the draft. He paused, choosing his words carefully. You'll be safe here. Relief softened her features, though wariness still lingered in her eyes. She clutched the blankets tighter and moved toward the ladder, then stopped and turned back. The town, they'll talk if they find out. Yeah, Austin agreed quietly. But God sees the truth of it. The words surprised him even as he spoke them, but he knew they were right. The bishop might not understand. But there was a higher law than man's judgment. Emma climbed the ladder, disappearing into the shadowy loft. Austin adjusted the lantern so its light would reach her, then checked that his horse was settled for the night. At the barn door, he paused, listening to the storm's fury. The snow was piling against the walls already, nature trying to bury all evidence of Emma's arrival. Back in his house, Austin knelt by his bed, prayer flowing from a troubled heart. Lord, give me wisdom, he whispered into the darkness. Show me the path of mercy. He knew Emma's presence would change everything, his routine, his standing with the bishop, perhaps even his place in the community. But as he listened to the wind's wild song, he felt a curious peace settle over him. Sometimes, he realized, doing right meant walking away from the safe, familiar path. Tomorrow would bring its own trials. For now, he had offered shelter to one of God's lost lambs. That would have to be enough. Morning crept over the Colorado highlands, the storm's fury gentling into silent, drifting flakes. Austin Lapp stood at his kitchen window, watching gray light seep through clouds heavy with snow. The kettle bubbled on his wood stove, and the smell of cooking porridge filled the small house. He spooned the steaming breakfast into 2 wooden bowls, adding a dollop of honey to a Cheech rare treat he usually saved for Sundays. But this morning felt different, weighted with both worry and something else he couldn't name. The barn doors creaked as he entered, careful not to spill the porridge. Emma sat near the lantern he'd left burning all night, her borrowed blankets wrapped tight around her shoulders. Her face was drawn with exhaustion, but her eyes were alert, watching his approach. Thought you might be hungry, Austin said, offering her a bowl. The lantern's glow caught the steam rising from the porridge, creating a small halo of warmth in the cool barn air. Much obliged, Emma whispered, accepting the bowl with trembling hands. She cupped it close, letting the heat seep into her fingers. After a cautious taste, her eyes widened. It's good, sweet. Honey from my bees, Austin explained, settling onto a nearby hay bale with his own breakfast. They ate in silence, broken only by the soft nickering of his horse and the scrape of spoons against wood. Emma's bowl was nearly empty when she spoke again, her voice barely carrying over the morning sounds of the barn. The town, they weren't kind to me. She stared into her porridge as if reading painful memories in its depths. Treated me like I was less than nothing. Austin nodded, not pressing for more. He'd seen how the settlement could turn cold to outsiders, especially those who arrived trailing mystery. After breakfast, Austin went about his morning chores. To his surprise, Emma followed, moving from task to task with quiet efficiency. At the cow barn, she picked up a milk pail without being asked, her movements sure and practiced. You've worked with animals before, Austin observed, watching her. Calm and nervous heifer with gentle touches and soft words. All my life, she replied, her hands moving steadily as she milked. Animals don't judge like people do. They only care how you treat them. The morning passed in shared work, a rhythm developing between them that felt almost natural. Austin noticed how Emma tensed at sudden sounds, how her eyes darted to the road whenever they worked near the fence line. It wasn't until they sat down to a simple dinner of bread and stew that the wall of her silence cracked further. The saloon owner in town, she burst out, her spoon clattering against her bowl. He tried to force me into working for him, said a woman alone had no choice. Her cheeks flushed with anger and shame. But I wouldn't. I couldn't. Teens. Hand tightened on his spoon, but he kept his voice gentle. No one should be forced into sin. Emma's hand strayed to her dress, where Austin noticed for the first time a subtle bulge of leather packet hidden in its folds. All I have left is... In here, she murmured, more to herself than to him. All that matters anyway. Later that evening, after the day's work was done, Austin returned to the barn for a final check on the animals. The lantern's light fell across Emma's sleeping form in the hayloft. She lay curled on her side, the mysterious packet clutched, tight against her chest even in sleep. Austin lowered the lantern, not wanting to disturb her rest. But the sight stirred something in his heart, compassion mixed with an unsettling awareness of the choice before him. The bishop's stern teachings about propriety and separation from the English, warred with the clear call to shelter those in need. In his house, he knelt by his bed, as was his custom, seeking guidance in prayer. "Show me the right path, Lord," he whispered, "the path of both obedience and mercy." The distant sound of horses' hooves cut through his prayers. Austin rose and moved to the window, peering out into the gathering darkness. Through the falling snow, he could just make out the movement of riders on the main road, their lanterns swaying like fireflies against the white landscape. His heart beat faster, knowing how quickly word could spread in their small settlement. How soon before someone remembered seeing Emma's tracks leading toward his farm? How long before judgment came knocking at his door? Austin drew the curtain closed, but the sound of those distant hooves echoed in his mind. Whatever trouble followed. Emma, it was drawing closer. Yet as he returned to his prayers, he knew he couldn't turn her out not into the cold. Not into the hands of those who would harm her. The right path was rarely the easy one. That much, at least, was clear. The next morning brought welcome clarity. To the Colorado highlands, sunlight glinted off fresh snow, and the air held that special crispness that comes after a storm. Austin found Emma already awake, feeding his chickens with careful attention to each bird. "Got some fence work needs doing," he said, adjusting his black hat. "Post broke during the storm. Would welcome the help, if you're willing." Emma's face brightened. "I can hold my own with tools." They trudged through knee-deep snow to the broken section. Austin carried posts and tools, while Emma followed with the heavy maul. The fence had indeed taken a beating. One post split clean through where wet snow had weighted down the wire. "Hold it steady now," Austin instructed, positioning the new post. Emma gripped it firmly, her stance sure and practiced. Together they worked in companionable silence, trading tools and tasks without need for many words. When Emma swung the maul to drive in the post, her strikes landed true and strong. "You've done this before," Austin observed, watching her work. "Pa taught me early on," she said, pausing to catch her breath. "Said a person ought to know how to mend what's broken." By noon, they had the fence section repaired better than new. Austin found himself grateful for the help work that would have taken him all day. Alone was finished before the sun reached its peak. Back in his kitchen, they shared a simple lunch of bread and soup. Emma seemed more at ease, though she still kept one hand near the hidden packet in her dress. Finally, she drew it out and laid it on the table between them. "Reckon you ought to know what trouble I might bring to your door," she said softly. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the worn leather, revealing yellowed papers within. Austin leaned forward, adjusting his lamp to see better. The document was carefully written, marked with both English script and other symbols he took to. Beute. Signs his eyes widened as he read. "This is a deed," he said, "for grazing rights in the valley. Signed by my father," Emma finished. "And by Chief Tawa of the Ute people. A proper agreement, witnessed and sealed. Her voice caught. Pa believed in doing things right and fair. Your father was murdered for this, Alstein asked, gently. Emma nodded, tears welling in her eyes. Found him in our cabin. They didn't even try to hide what they'd done. Thought they'd find the deed on him. But I'd already taken it to mend a tear in the leather. She drew a shaky breath. Been running ever since. Austin sat back, understanding now the weight of what had landed in his barn 2 nights ago. Such a document could indeed cause strife or bring justice, depending on whose hands held it. What will you do with it? Asked. Emma traced the signatures with one finger. Been asking myself that since Pa died. Could give it to the Ute Sits, rightly theirs. Could burn it, maybe find peace that way, or just keep hiding. She looked up. At Austin, what would you do? Austin considered carefully before speaking. Truth is like a spring in dry country, he said finally. Bury it, and the land stays thirsty. Let it flow free, and things can grow again. Evening shadows lengthened across the kitchen floor as they sat in thoughtful silence. The quiet was broken by the sound of approaching horses, then voices on the road beyond his property. Word spreading, Austin said, rising to peer out the window. Neighbors talking. Someone must have seen you come to the barn that night. Emma's face paled. I should go. No, Austin said firmly. Stay inside where it's safe. We'll weather this storm same as the last one. They cleared the supper dishes together, the lamp's soft glow catching the worry in Emma's eyes. Austin noticed how the light gentled her features, how her hands moved with quiet grace as she dried each plate and cup. The sharp knock at the door made them both jump. Brother Lapp. The voice was Elder Hochstetler's, carrying that special tone of righteous concern that Austin knew too well. The bishop sends me to speak with you about a matter of community concern. Austin straightened his shoulders, looking once at Emma's frightened face. Go up to the loft, he whispered. Stay quiet. Emma nodded and slipped silently up the steep stairs. Austin watched her disappear into the shadows before turning to face what waited on the other side of his door. Austin opened his door to find Elder Hochstetler standing in the lamplight, his stern face shadowed beneath his broad-brimmed hat. The elder's eyes darted past Austin's shoulder, searching the dimly lit room. Brother Lapp, Elder Hochstetler said, his voice carrying a sharp edge. Word has reached us that you're harboring a woman here. An English woman, no less. Austin kept his voice steady. She needed shelter from the storm. The storm passed 2 days ago. The elder's disapproval hung heavy in the cold air. You risk more than your own standing in the community, Brother Lapp. You risk becoming a stumbling block. To others? I mean no disrespect, Elder Austin said quietly. Harboring temptation under your roof. Elder Hochstetler shook his head slowly. The bishop expects you at Sunday meeting to answer for this impropriety. We cannot allow worldly influences to corrupt our ways. His eyes narrowed. Where is she now? Safe. Austin answered simply. The elder's mouth tightened. Remember your place, Brother Lapp. Remember what we stand for. With that, he turned and walked into the darkness, his boots crunching in the snow. Austin closed the door, his hands trembling slightly as he slid the bolt home. Emma descended the loft stairs, her face drawn with worry. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I never meant to bring trouble to your door. Perhaps I should leave tonight. No, Austin said firmly. The night's too cold, and there's been wolf sign near the cattle. You'll stay. The next day passed in quiet industry. Emma proved herself useful in the kitchen, her hands sure as she kneaded bread dough and stirred soup bubbling on the cook stove. Austin found himself watching her as she worked, noting how she hummed softly while washing dishes, how she remembered exactly how he liked his coffee, As dusk gathered, they sat in the warm kitchen. Austin drew out his well-worn Bible, its pages soft with years of daily reading. His voice filled the room steady and clear as he read by lamplight. "Come unto me, all those that labor and are heavy laden," he read, "and I will give you rest." Emma sat very still, her hands folded in her lap. When Austin reached the passage about Christ defending the woman at the well, he saw tears sliding down her cheeks. "He didn't turn her away," Emma whispered. Even knowing what others said about her, Austin closed the Bible gently. No, he didn't. Their quiet moment was shattered by sudden commotion from the barn. The cattle were lowing in distress, and Austin could hear his horses stamping nervously. "Wolf," he said, reaching for his coat and lantern. Emma was already pulling on her boots. "I'm coming with you," she said firmly. Together they hurried through the moonlit snow to the barn. Austin's lantern beam caught a gray shape slinking along the wall. The wolf turned, eyes glowing green in the light, teeth bared in a snarl. Emma grabbed a pitchfork while Austin raised his lantern higher. The wolf hesitated, caught between hunger and fear. Emma stepped forward boldly, jabbing the pitchfork in the air. The wolf backed away, then turned and loped into the darkness. They stayed until the cattle settled, checking that no harm had come to the animals. Austin found himself impressed by Emma's courage. How she hadn't hesitated to face danger at his side. Walking back to the house, Austin looked up at the stars. Wheeling overhead, the Sunday meeting loomed before him like a mountain he must climb. The bishop would expect answers. The community would demand judgment. As dawn approached, Austin sat at his kitchen table, watching the first gray light creep. Across the snow, his decision was made. He would take Emma to the meeting house, face the elders together. Let them see her true heart as he had seen it these past days. "We'll go to the meeting," he told Emma as she came down from the loft. Together. Fear flickered across her face, but she straightened her shoulders and nodded. "Together," she echoed. Softly, Austin took down his best black coat, brushing it carefully. Whatever came next, he would meet it standing tall. Knowing in his heart that offering shelter to one in need could never truly be wrong. Sunday morning dawned clear and cold, the sun casting long shadows across the fresh snow. Austin hitched the horses to his plain black wagon while Emma wrapped herself in a borrowed shawl. The horses' breath steamed in the frosty air as they set out for town. Wheels crunching through the snow-packed road, Emma sat straight-backed beside Austin on the wagon seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Neither spoke much during the journey, both lost in their own thoughts as the wagon rolled steadily toward the weathered T meeting house that stood at the edge of town. Heads turned. As Austin helped Emma down from the wagon, whispers followed them up the wooden steps and through the meeting house doors. Inside, the simple room was already filling with families in their Sunday best. The women in black bonnets, the men in dark coats and broad-brimmed hats. Austin guided Emma to a bench near the back, aware of the sideways glances and hushed conversations. Elder Hochstetler's face darkened at their entrance, but Bishop Hochstetler kept his expression carefully neutral as he took his place at the front, as the congregation settled into worship. A surprising peace settled over Austin. The familiar hymns rose around them, sung in the old way without instruments. Emma sat quietly beside him, her shoulder barely touching his as their voices joined the others in praise. But the peace was short-lived. After the final amen, Bishop Hochstetler's soft voice cut through the rustling of skirts and shifting of boots. "Brother Lapp, the elders would speak with you now." Austin stood, straightening his coat. Emma made to rise with him, but he gestured for her to stay seated. He walked to the front where the bishop and elders had gathered, their faces grave. "Brother Lapp," the bishop began, his voice carrying in the hushed room. You have brought an outsider among us, housed her under your roof unchaperoned. This cannot continue. Elder Hochstetler stepped forward. The community's reputation is at stake. We must maintain our separation from worldly influences. She must leave, another elder added firmly. Today, for the sake of our community's purity. Austin took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every eye in the meeting house upon him. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but clear. With respect, Bishop, I cannot do as you ask. A murmur rippled through the congregation. The bishop's eyebrows rose slightly. Cannot or will not? Both, Austin answered steadily. To cast out someone in need would dishonor God more than any gossip could dishonor us. The scriptures teach us to shelter the stranger, to protect the vulnerable. Gasps echoed through the meeting house. Emma trembled visibly on her bench, but Austin turned to meet her eyes. He walked back to where she sat and deliberately took her hand, helping her to her feet. My conscience is clear before God, he said, facing the congregation. I will not turn away one who needs shelter. The bishop's face was unreadable as Austin and Emma walked down the center aisle. As they passed the rows of benches, some neighbors turned away, but others nodded slightly, respect mixing with the pity in their eyes. The ride home seemed longer than the morning's journey. The winter sun hung low in the afternoon sky as their wagon creaked along the snowy road. Emma finally broke the silence. I haven't prayed much since Papa died, she admitted softly. It felt like God had turned his back on us. Austin clicked gently to the horses before responding. God never turns away, he said. Sometimes we just can't see his hand through our pain. Emma wiped a tear from her cheek. You risked everything for me today. I did what was right, Austin said simply. Nothing more. By the time they reached the farm, night was falling. They worked together to unhitch the horses and tend to the evening chores, moving in comfortable silence. Their shared defiance of the elders had forged a quiet bond between them. But in town, other forces were stirring. In the smoky confines of the saloon, the owner slammed his glass down as he listened to the day's gossip. His face darkened at the news that the Amish farmer was protecting the woman who had fled his advances. So she's found herself a protector. Has she? He growled, pushing away from the bar. We'll see about that. Neither Austin nor Emma knew of these threats as they finished their evening tasks. Their thoughts were on simpler things: the warmth of the kitchen stove, the soft glow of the lamp, and the knowledge that they had chosen right over easy. Mercy over judgment. As Emma climbed the stairs to the loft and Austin settled into his chair with his Bible, both felt a strange peace despite the day's confrontations. They had stood their ground together. It's cute somehow that made the uncertain future seem less daunting. The days flowed into one another like water in a stream. Morning. Chores blended with afternoon tasks, and Austin found himself watching Emma's growing confidence with quiet satisfaction. Her hands, once hesitant, moved with purpose, whether feeding chickens or stacking firewood. The chicken coop needed attention after the heavy snows. Austin and Emma worked side by side, replacing worn boards and patching holes where predators might slip through. Emma proved particularly good at spotting weak spots in the wire mesh. Papa taught me to look for the smallest gaps, she explained, threading new wire through the fence. Even a tiny hole can invite trouble. Austin nodded, hammering a nail into a fresh plank. Wisdom in that. He paused, wiping sweat from his brow despite the lingering winter chill. Your father taught you well. They gathered firewood together, Emma insisting on carrying her share despite Austin's protests. The winter bear forest yielded plenty of deadfall, and their boots crunched through patches of remaining snow as they worked. The woodpile grew steadily higher against the barn wall. Preparation for the spring thaw that would bring mud and rain before the warmth truly settled in. Word spread through the community about Emma's continued presence at Austin's farm. Some tongues wagged sharply, claiming she was ruining his reputation among the plain folk. Yet not all voices raised against them. Several widows in the community spoke quietly of Austin's kindness, remembering times when he had helped them with heavy work or shared from his harvest. One evening, as they sat at the kitchen table sharing a simple supper of beef stew and fresh bread, Emma's spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. "I don't deserve all this kindness," she said softly, staring into her bowl. "The things people say about me in town." Austin set down his own spoon, considering his words carefully. "Every soul is precious in God's sight," he said finally. "We don't earn kindness. It's given freely, like His grace." Emma's eyes glistened in the lamplight, but she managed a small smile. After the dishes were cleared, they walked together through the orchard rows. The apple trees stood bare against the darkening sky, their branches stark and empty. Yet Austin saw promise in their silence. "These trees sleep now," he explained, reaching up to touch a branch. "But they're alive inside, waiting for springs. Warmth to wake them." Emma moved closer, examining the branch. "I could help with the pruning," she offered. "Once the frost breaks, I've done it before." Austin glanced at her, surprised and pleased. "Much obliged." "It's better work with two pairs of hands." The evening settled around them like a soft blanket as they returned to the warmth of the house. Austin lit the lamp and reached for his Bible, its leather cover worn smooth by years of handling. Emma sat quietly in the chair across from him, her hands folded in her lap, as Austin began to pray, his voice steady and sure in the lamplight. He heard Emma's whispered echo of his words. Her voice grew stronger as the prayer continued, and something warm spread in Austin's chest at the sound of their voices joined in devotion. But while peace grew within the farmhouse, danger stirred in town. The saloon owner, Jake Morton, nursed his wounded pride with whiskey and bitter thoughts. The sight of Emma slipping through his fingers aided him like acid. "Want you boys to keep an eye on Lap's place," he told two rough-looking men at his bar. Money changed hands in the smoky darkness. "Just watch for now. Let me know who comes and goes." The men nodded, pocketing their payment. They would begin their surveillance the next day, though neither Austin nor Emma would notice the distant figures watching from the tree line or the occasional glint of field glasses in the sun. Inside the farmhouse, Austin and Emma continued their daily rhythm of work and prayer, finding unexpected comfort in their shared routines. Emma's laugh, once rare, came more easily now, brightening the kitchen as she kneaded bread or helped. Austin planned the spring planting. Each evening brought them closer to understanding one another. Emma learned to read Austin's quiet ways, too. See the gentle heart behind his reserved manner. Austin discovered Emma's strength, her willingness to work hard despite her troubles, her genuine care for the animals and land. Together, they created something neither had expected: the beginnings of family. Not by blood or marriage, but through shared purpose and growing trust. Their prayers became more natural, their silences more comfortable, their work more synchronized. Yet even as they found this tender peace, unseen eyes watched from the shadows, and wheels were turning that would soon test their newfound bond. But for now, in the quiet of their days and the warmth of their shared faith, Austin and Emma knew only the blessing of work well done and prayers sincerely offered. The first whispers of spring crept across the Colorado highlands. Snow retreated into shadowed hollows, leaving behind muddy earth that squelched beneath boots. The orchard stood ready for its annual awakening, bare branches reaching toward warming skies. Austin and Emma moved between the trees with pruning, shears and saw, working in comfortable silence. He showed her how to spot the dead wood, where to make clean cuts that would help the trees heal. Emma proved a quick study, her movements becoming more confident with each branch. "Like this?" she asked, demonstrating a cut on a small branch. Austin nodded, pleased. Perfect. The tree will thank you come harvest time. They cleared winter-killed brush from beneath the trees, piling it for burning later. The work was hard, but satisfying, and Emma's laughter began to ring out more freely as they shared the labor. When Austin's hat got caught on a branch and tipped sideways, her giggles echoed across the orchard, bringing a rare smile to his weathered face. As evening approached, they hauled water together from the creek for the kitchen and animals. Emma carried her bucket with surprising strength, matching Austin's steady pace. When some water sloshed over the rim and splashed their boots, they both chuckled, the sound rising naturally between them. Later, as they rested on the porch, Emma's mood turned reflective. She watched the last light fade from the western sky, her hands clasped in her lap. "Papa had such dreams for this valley," she said softly. He believed there was enough grass for everyone's herds, settlers and Utes alike. She pulled the leather packet from her apron pocket, turning it over in her hands. "But this deed, sometimes I think it brings more trouble than peace. If word spreads about what it contains, there could be fighting, blood spilled over grass and treaties." Austin listened quietly, his steady presence encouraging her to continue. "The Utes have their own sacred places here." Papa understood that. He wanted to find a way for both peoples to share the land. Emma's voice caught. "But some men only see profit, not peace." Austin considered her words carefully before speaking. "Let me pray about it," he said, his deep voice gentle in the gathering dusk. He bowed his head, and Emma followed suit. "Lord," he began, "grant us wisdom to know your will. Show us how to honor both truth and peace. Guide Emma's heart in this matter and protect all who might be touched by this document's power. Amen." Emma's eyes glistened as she reached over and squeezed his calloused hand. The simple prayer had touched something deep within her, something that had been cold and afraid for too long. Inside, Austin served up bowls of venison stew, rich with potatoes and carrots from the root cellar. The kitchen was warm and fragrant, and Emma felt a profound sense of belonging as they shared the meal. This place, with its plain furniture and well-worn Bible on the shelf, had become more home to her than anywhere since her father's death. They cleaned up together, their movements easy and synchronized after weeks of shared work. Through the window, Emma watched the first stars appear, feeling a peace she had almost forgotten existed. Unknown to them, a lone rider passed slowly along the distant road, pausing to study the lamplight glowing in Austin's windows. Face was hidden beneath his hat brim, but his attention to the homestead was clear. Austin noticed the shadowy figure from the kitchen window and felt a flutter of unease, but kept his concerns to himself, not wanting to disturb Emma's newfound contentment. Morning brought a fresh promise of spring. Tender green shoots pushed through the orchard soil, and buds swelled on the apple trees. Austin and Emma walked the rows together, checking on their pruning work from the day before. "Look," Emma said, pointing to a cluster of tiny buds. "New life coming." Austin nodded, touching a branch gently. "The Lord provides new beginnings," he said quietly, "for trees and people alike." A thin line of smoke rose from the direction of town, barely visible against the morning sky. Austin knew it came from the saloon's chimney, where Jake Morton nursed his grudges and made his plans. But here in the orchard, surrounded by the miracle of spring's renewal, such threats seemed distant. Emma knelt to examine a patch of wild violets pushing through the dead leaves. Her face glowed with simple joy, and Austin felt his heart warm at the sight. Together, they had found something precious in these quiet days of shared work and prayer, something that felt like hope, like family, like the promise of good things to come. They continued their inspection of the orchard, moving between the rows with unhurried purpose. While around them, the land awakened to spring's gentle touch. Late spring painted the Colorado highlands in vibrant hues. The orchard burst into life, each tree crowned with delicate white blossoms that transformed Austin's land into a fragrant wonderland. Petals drifted like snow in the gentle breeze, dusting Emma's dark hair as she worked beside the kitchen window. Kneading bread dough with practiced hands, Austin stepped inside, carrying fresh eggs from the henhouse. The kitchen was warm and yeasty sweet from baking. "Smells like heaven in here," he said. Setting down his basket, Emma smiled, her cheeks flushed from the heat of the stove. "Fresh bread for our orchard blessing," she replied, "just like Mama used to make when the blossoms came." The loaves turned out golden brown and perfect. They carried their simple feast outside, warm bread, butter, and honey, to enjoy among the flowering trees. Emma's laughter rang out clear and bright when Austin got flour on his beard, trying to eat and talk at the same time. As twilight approached, they prepared to plant new apple seedlings Austin had grafted over winter. He carried the lantern while Emma followed with the precious saplings wrapped in damp burlap. The evening air was soft and cool, filled with the calls of spring peepers from the creek bottom. "These need good soil and prayer to grow strong," Austin explained, digging the first hole. Emma knelt beside him, carefully unwrapping a seedling. Together, they planted each young tree, their movements synchronized after months of shared work. When the last sapling was settled in its new home, they paused to pray over the orchard. The lantern cast a gentle glow across their bowed heads as they clasped hands. "Lord," Austin began, his deep voice quiet in the gathering dark, "bless these trees and the hands that tend them." Emma's fingers tightened around his. "I haven't known such peace since I was a little girl," she whispered when the prayer ended. "Before Papa," her voice caught. But her smile was genuine in the lantern light. Austin had to turn away briefly, overwhelmed by gratitude. His lonely homestead had become something else entirely, a place of healing and hope. He squeezed Emma's hand gently before releasing it to gather their tools, but danger rode the night winds. As Austin and Emma worked, unseen figures passed along the distant road. 3 riders pulled up at the edge of Austin's property, studying the barn's silhouette against the starlit sky. "Simple enough," one man muttered, just loud enough for his companions to hear. 2 doors, no windows worth mentioning. Getting the girl and the deed both should be easy enough. "Morton wants it done clean," another replied. No traces to lead back to the saloon. They rode on, but their presence left a shadow on the peaceful night. Hours later, Austin woke suddenly in his bed, every sense alert. The sound of hoofbeats faded into the distance, riders passing close to the house. He threw on his clothes and grabbed the lantern, hurrying to check the barn. He found Emma already awake, sitting up in her makeshift bed of clean straw. Her face was pale in the lamplight, and she clutched the leather packet containing her father's deed. "I heard them," she whispered. They rode so close. Austin set the lantern down and knelt beside her. "No one will harm you here," he promised, his voice firm despite the worry in his heart. "You're under my protection, Emma, under God's protection." She nodded, but her hands trembled. Austin helped her up, brushing straw from her skirts. "Come to the house," he said gently. "You can sleep by the stove tonight. It's safer." They walked together through the cool night air, Austin carrying the lantern high. Emma stayed close to his side, her steps quick and nervous. Inside, he built up the fire while she settled on the bench nearby, wrapping herself in a quilt. The first light of dawn was just touching the eastern sky when Austin finished his preparations, checking doors, windows, and the rifle he kept above the mantel. He joined Emma by the stove, where she had dozed off sitting up, still holding the deed packet. Morning painted the fields in soft gold, but Austin couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over his peaceful homestead. Like storm clouds gathering on a distant horizon, trouble was brewing. He watched through the window as day broke fully over the orchard, its blossoms now seeming fragile and fleeting in the growing light. Emma stirred, opening her eyes to the new day. "Thank you," she murmured, "for keeping me safe." Austin nodded, but his jaw was set with determination. They would need more than gratitude to face what was coming. For now, though, he let her find comfort in the morning's quiet and the familiar sense of coffee and wood smoke that filled his kitchen. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Austin's land as he and Emma worked together, hauling fresh hay bales from the meadow to the barn. Emma's strength had grown over the months of farm work, and she matched Austin's steady pace, determination clear on her face. Last load before supper, Austin called, lifting another bale. The familiar scent of fresh-cut hay filled the air, mingling with apple blossoms on the breeze. The crack of gunfire shattered their peaceful rhythm. 3 shots echoed across the highlands, sending birds scattering from the trees. Austin dropped his hay bale, spinning toward the sound. 6 riders thundered into the yard, dust billowing behind their horses. He recognized the lead man, Morton, the saloon owner, his face twisted with cruel intent. "Stand aside, Amish," Morton sneered, drawing his pistol. "We've come for the girl and that deed she's carrying." Austin planted himself between the riders and Emma. "This is God's land," he said firmly. "Leave us in peace." Morton nodded to his men. 2 dismounted, boots hitting the dirt hard. Before Austin could react, they rushed him. He managed to knock one back, but the other caught him with a heavy blow to the jaw. Austin stumbled, tasting blood. "Get the girl," Morton ordered. Emma screamed as rough hands seized her arms. She kicked and fought, but they dragged her toward the horses. The leather packet containing the deed fell from her dress pocket into the dirt. Austin struggled to his feet, only to be knocked down again. Through blurred vision, he saw Morton dismount and snatch up the fallen packet. "Burn it," Morton commanded, gesturing to the barn. "Leave nothing standing." One of the men produced a bottle filled with kerosene. The sharp smell hit Austin's nostrils as they splashed it across the barn's wooden walls. A match flared, and flames leaped hungrily up the timbers. No. Austin lunged forward but caught another blow that sent him sprawling. His cattle began bellowing in panic as thick smoke rolled skyward. The fire spread with terrifying speed, consuming the dry wood and hay. Emma's voice cut through the roar. "Of flames, Austin, help me." He looked up to see her being thrown across a saddle, still fighting. Morton's men mounted up, keeping their guns trained on Austin as they backed away. The saloon owner smiled coldly. "Should have minded your own business, plain man." Morton sneered. "Your pure ways won't save you out here." Austin could only watch, body aching as the riders galloped away with Emma. Her cries faded into the distance, drowned out by the inferno consuming his barn. Years of careful work, the symbol of his Amish dedication, disappeared into ash and flame. The crack and roar of burning timber filled the air. His cattle scattered into the far pasture, wild with fear. Black smoke billowed up, choking the spring. Sky that had been so beautiful just moments before. Neighbors arrived too late, drawn by the smoke signal of destruction. They found Austin on his knees in the yard, watching his barn collapse into ruin. Some tried to save what they could, but the fire had taken too firm a hold. "Brother Lapp," Elder Hochstetler said gravely, laying a hand on Austin's shoulder. "We heard the shots. What happened here?" Austin's voice was rough with smoke and grief. "They took her, Morton and his men. Took Emma and the deed both." The elder's face darkened. "This is what comes of harboring no." Austin cut him off, something he'd never done before. This is what comes of men choosing cruelty over mercy. As evening fell, the barn was nothing but smoldering ruins. Austin's neighbors drifted away, leaving him alone with his devastation. The night grew cold, but he remained kneeling in the ashes of his life's work. His prayer started as a whisper, growing stronger despite his split lip and bruised ribs. Lord, why? I've lived pure, kept separate, followed every rule. Tears tracked down his soot-stained face. Yet they mock my faith, burn my work, steal an innocent woman. His voice broke. What good is my obedience if it lets evil triumph? The stars emerged one by one above him, silent witnesses to his pain. The ruins of his barn still glowed with stubborn embers, tiny points of light in the darkness. As Austin watched them, something stirred in his heart. Not peace, but purpose. A spark of courage began to kindle, burning away his doubt. He touched his bruised jaw, remembering Emma's terrified face as they dragged her away. The simple farmer who had always chosen quiet submission felt something new taking root, a determination that transcended his pain. The night wrapped around him like a shroud, but in the ashes of his carefully ordered life. Austin Lapp began to understand that true faith might require more than passive acceptance. The first rays of dawn painted the Colorado highlands in soft gold as Austin Lapp saddled his horse. His body ached from yesterday's beating, but determination burned brighter than pain. He adjusted the cinch with practiced hands, speaking softly to the nervous animal. Brother Lapp. Elder Hochstetler hurried across the yard, followed by several neighbors. Think on what you're doing. I have thought, Austin replied, his voice quiet but firm. All night in prayer. Sarah Miller, a widow who lived nearby, stepped forward. Let her go, Austin. That girl brings nothing but trouble. Look what's become of your barn already. Austin turned to face them, his bruised face solemn in the morning light. Would you have me abandon her to wickedness? Is that our way? The bishop will hear of this, the elder warned. Then let him hear. Austin mounted his horse, looking down. At the gathered neighbors, I answered to God first. He rode toward town at a steady pace, the morning sun warming his back. His plain black hat and simple clothes marked him clearly as Amish among the frontier settlers. People stopped to stare as he passed, whispering behind their hands. Morton's saloon stood at the edge of town, its weathered boards dark against the morning sky. A crowd had already gathered, drawn by news of yesterday's violence. Austin dismounted, tying his horse to the hitching post. His boots struck the wooden sidewalk with purposeful steps. Inside the saloon, morning light filtered through. Grimy windows? The room fell silent as Austin entered, all eyes turning to the plain man in their midst. Morton stood behind the bar, a mocking smile on his face. Well, if it ain't the virgin farmer himself, Morton called out. Come to beg for your girl. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Austin stood straight despite his injuries, his voice carrying clearly across the room. I've come for justice. Justice. Morton sneered. You're the one harboring a troublemaker. That girl's caused nothing but strife since she came to town. Emma has done no wrong, Austin declared. The wrong is in those who would harm an innocent woman for profit. More laughter erupted. Listen to him. Someone shouted. The virgin. Farmers finally lost his head over a pretty face. Austin raised his voice, silencing the mockery. You mistake purity for cowardice. True purity is not hiding from the world. It is showing mercy to those in need. His words rang through the suddenly quiet room. You who would harm a woman, who would burn a man's barn and steal what isn't yours, where is your honor? The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Even Morton's smile faltered. A movement caught Austin's eye. Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, guarded by one of Morton's men. Her face was tear-stained but determined. Before anyone could stop her, she pulled something from her sleeve and tossed it down to Austin. He caught the folded paper, opening it quickly. Emma's voice carried down from above. "I sent word to Chief Tawa 3 days ago. He knows about the deed and what these men did to my father." Morton's face darkened. "She's bluffing. The Utes won't. The Woots won't." The thunder of hoofbeats cut him off. The crowd turned toward the sound. As riders approached, Chief Tawa led a group of warriors into town, their horses raising dust in the morning light. The townspeople drew back, creating a path as the Ute chief dismounted and walked toward the saloon. Chief Tawa's presence commanded respect, his dignified bearing a sharp contrast to Morton's swagger. He looked at Austin, noting his injuries, then turned to Morton. "The woman speaks truth," Chief Tawa said, his voice deep and measured. "Her father was an honorable man. We signed that deed in good faith." He gestured to one of his warriors, who produced a matching document. This valley was to be shared in peace between our peoples. Morton's face had gone pale. "Now, see here," no Chief Toya cut him off. "You will see, that deed is legal and binding. The woman holds her father's rights. Any who dispute this answer to both our peoples and the law." The crowd murmured, the mood shifting. Some of Morton's men edged away from him, unwilling to stand against both the Ute warriors and the law itself. Emma descended the stairs, no one daring to stop her now. She walked to stand beside Austin, her head held high. Morton looked around at the changed faces of the crowd, seeing his support crumbling. Chief Tawa's warriors remained mounted outside, a silent reminder of power. The saloon owner's bluster, deflated like a pricked balloon. Chief Tawa's presence filled the saloon as he stood tall, his weathered face stern with authority. The morning light through dusty windows caught the silver in his dark hair. Every eye fixed on him as he held up the matching deed. "This paper speaks truth," he declared, his voice steady and strong. Emma's father was a man of honor who kept his word. He understood that peace between our peoples must rest on trust. The chief's dark eyes swept the room. That trust was broken by greed and murder. Morton's face twisted with spite. "You expect us to believe some piece of paper? This? Land belongs to settlers now." "The paper bears witness," Chief Tawa replied calmly. "But more than paper, it carries the weight of a promise between honorable men. Such promises must not be broken." Emma stood straighter beside Austin, drawing strength from the chief's words. Her fingers brushed the leather packet hidden in her dress, where her own copy of the deed lay safe. The saloon owner glanced around, seeking support, but found only uncertain faces. His hired men shifted uneasily, none willing to challenge both Ute warriors and the law. Even the most hardened troublemakers sensed the tide had turned. "Your violence against this woman and this plain man shames you," Chief Tawa continued. "Peace in the valley requires justice, not force." One by one, townspeople began slipping away from Morton's side. Women who had whispered cruel gossip now looked down in shame. Men who had laughed at Austin's faith avoided his steady gaze. Morton's sneer turned desperate as his support melted away. "This ain't over," he spat, but his words rang hollow in the emptying saloon. Austin gently took Emma's arm. "We are leaving now," he said quietly. No one moved to stop them as they walked toward the door. Outside, morning sun warmed the dusty street. Chief Tawa followed them, his warriors still mounted and watchful. Townsfolk hurried past, keeping their distance but stealing glances at the unusual group, the plain man, the outcast woman, and the Ute chief standing together. Chief Tawa turned to Emma, his manner softening. "You showed great courage, daughter of my friend. Your father would be proud that you protected his promise." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure. Word travels on the wind," the chief replied. When we heard of violence at the plain man's farm, we knew that time had come. He looked at Austin. Your faith gave her shelter when others turned away. This speaks well of your people. Austin bowed his head slightly. I only did what was right. Sometimes that is the hardest path, Chief Tawa said. His expression grew. Serious, but listen well, both of you. Peace is like a young plant. It must be tended carefully or it dies. The deed gives rights to graze cattle, nothing more. Some will still try to take more than is given. We understand, Emma said softly. Guard the peace with justice, the chief advised. Let your actions show others the better way. With a dignified nod, he mounted his horse and led his warriors. From town. The ride home was quiet, both Austin and Emma lost in thought. Late afternoon shadows stretched across the land when they finally reached the homestead. The sight of the burned barn struck fresh pain in Austin's heart. Blackened timbers reached toward the sky like accusing fingers. They sat on the porch as evening deepened into night. The spring air carried the sweet scent of apple blossoms from the orchard. Moonlight silvered the young trees Austin and Emma had tended together, making them glow with fragile beauty. Austin bowed his head in prayer. Thank you, Lord, for protecting Emma's life. His voice was rough with emotion. Thank you for bringing truth to light. Emma touched his arm gently. I'm so sorry about your barn. All your hard work, buildings can be rebuilt, Austin said. Lives cannot be replaced. Then we'll rebuild together, Emma declared firmly. Every beam, every board. God brought me here for a reason. Perhaps this is part of it. Austin looked at her in the moonlight, seeing strength behind her gentle features. This woman who had arrived at his door half-frozen had found her courage. His heart swelled with gratitude. Together, he agreed softly. The orchard stretched before them, delicate blossoms promising future fruit. Like Chief Tawa said, peace needed tending. But here, in this moment, Austin felt hope taking root as surely as the saplings they had planted side by side. Dawn brought the sound of wagon wheels. Austin stepped onto his porch, surprised to see 3 Amish families approaching, their horses pulling loads of fresh-cut timber. They halted in the yard, faces solemn but kind beneath broad-brimmed hats. We heard about the burning, Samuel Yoder said, climbing down. Thought you might need some help, brother. Emma hung back in the doorway, uncertain, but Austin nodded. Gratefully. Much obliged, he said quietly. More neighbors arrived throughout the morning. English settlers from down the valley brought tools and nails. Women carried baskets of food. Though some still looked askance at Emma, none spoke against her presence. The work began slowly, clearing charred ruins. Emma grabbed a saw without hesitation, joining Austin at the cutting station. Her sure movements caught appreciative glances from the Amish women, who whispered among themselves. You handle that saw well, Austin said during a break, watching her measure a plank. Emma smiled, wiping sweat from her brow. My father taught me, said a woman should know how to build her own life. They worked through the mild spring day. At noon, Emma served fresh bread and stew to the workers. As Austin ate, she touched his shoulder gently. God provides helpers when we need them most, she murmured. The afternoon brought more progress. Post holes were dug, heavy beams raised. Emma worked alongside everyone, hauling nails, steadying lumber, her quiet determination earning respect. Near sunset, Bishop Hochstetler's buggy appeared. Conversation hushed as he approached Austin, who stood straight despite his weariness. The bishop surveyed the rising framework, then spoke softly. The ways of the Lord are not always clear to us, Austin. He paused, choosing words carefully. Man's understanding is limited, but God sees all hearts. Austin waited, sensing more to come. You must answer to him alone for your choices, the bishop continued. I cannot say you were wrong to show mercy. With that, he touched his hat and departed, leaving Austin relieved. By this tacit acceptance, as darkness fell, lanterns were lit and the workers headed home. Emma and Austin walked to the orchard, carrying a lantern that swung gently between them. Apple blossoms perfumed the evening air, their pale petals luminous. In the shifting light, "Do you regret it?" Emma asked suddenly. "All the trouble I brought." Austin studied the delicate blossoms overhead. "No," he said simply. "You were worth it." Emma's eyes shone with unshed tears. Together, they stood in comfortable silence, surrounded by the promise of fruit to come. The lantern cast warm circles of light on new leaves and fresh hope, making the orchard glow like a blessing. The new barn rose tall against the Colorado sky, its fresh-cut timbers gleaming in late summer sun. Austin and Emma had worked side by side for months, and now only the final touches remained. To celebrate, they invited neighbors for a modest gathering. Wagons and buggies rolled in by mid-afternoon. Women carried covered dishes and fresh-baked pies, while men brought loaves of hearty bread. Even those who had once whispered against Emma now smiled warmly, watching her arrange tables in the yard. "The Lord provides in mysterious ways," Sarah Miller said, setting down a steaming apple pie. "Sometimes through storms that drive us to shelter." She squeezed Emma's hand, and Emma felt her throat tighten with emotion. Children played near the orchard, while their elders gathered around the tables. The aroma of fresh bread and sweet pies mingled with the earthy scent of new hay. Austin stood quietly, taking in the scene, his community coming together, healing old wounds. Elder Hochstetler raised his hands for silence. "Let us pray," he announced, his voice carrying across the yard. "Lord, we ask your blessing on this homestead. May this barn shelter not just beasts, but truth and mercy. Bless those who dwell here, who have shown us that your love knows no boundaries. Amen." The gathering echoed. Emma wiped tears from her cheeks, overwhelmed by the feeling of belonging. After months of fear and loneliness, she had found her place. The meal passed with gentle conversation and laughter, the afternoon sun painting everything in golden light. As the gathering began to thin, Austin touched Emma's elbow. "Would you walk with me?" "Yes," softly. They strolled toward the orchard, where apple trees held the last rays of sunlight. Austin's hands trembled slightly as he turned to face her. "Emma," he began, his voice rough with emotion, "you came to me in a storm, seeking shelter, but you brought light to my solitude." He paused, gathering courage. "Would you stay, not just as my helper, but as my wife?" Emma's heart swelled. She saw in his eyes the same kindness that had opened the barn door that stormy night. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will stay." They knelt together beneath the apple trees, joining hands in prayer. "Thank you, Lord," Austin prayed, "for second chances, for showing us that your plan is greater than our fears." Later, after the guests had gone, Emma walked the new barn's clean-swept aisles. Lantern light gleamed on fresh wood and content cattle. She remembered that first frightening night, huddled in old straw, clutching her father's deed. Now the same space held only warmth and promise. She ran her hand along a smooth beam, marveling at how fear had transformed into safety, how loneliness had become love. The barn stood strong and true, like Austin's faith, like their shared future. Austin appeared in the doorway, lantern in hand. "Welcome home," he said softly. Morning light spilled across the Colorado highlands, painting the orchard in gentle gold. Apple blossoms hung thick on every branch, their sweet scent drifting through the early summer air. Inside the farmhouse kitchen, Emma stood at the wood stove, stirring a pot of porridge while Austin set 2 bowls on the table. Through the window, sunrise touched the new barn's weathered boards. 6 months of marriage had settled into comfortable routine, yet each dawn felt fresh with possibility. Emma hummed softly an old hymn, her father once sang as she spooned breakfast into their bowls. "The Lord's blessed us with fine weather for the hang," Austin said, breaking their comfortable silence. His voice held the warmth it had found since their wedding day. Emma nodded, sitting beside him. The orchards never looked so fine. She reached for his hand as they bowed their heads in morning prayer. After breakfast, they walked together toward the barn, their boots leaving tracks in the morning dew. Sunlight streamed through the high windows they'd added during rebuilding, making golden paths across the swept floor. The structure stood stronger than before, its beams thick and true, every joint set with care and prayer. Austin paused in the doorway, remembering. Once, not so long ago, neighbors had mocked his solitary ways, whispering about the strange Amish farmer who lived alone, too pure to court a wife. Now he understood that what they'd seen as weakness had been preparation, God teaching him that true strength lay in mercy, not judgment. Emma moved among the cattle, her sure hands checking each animal. She paused to stroke a young calf's head, her fingers gentle on its velvet ears. "Sometimes I still can't believe it," she whispered, not turning around. "Having a real home again. After Father died, I thought I'd wander forever." "God's mercy finds us all," Austin replied softly, even in storms. The morning breeze carried apple blossoms through the barn doors, white petals drifting like summer snow. Austin and Emma stood together in the doorway, watching the dance of light and shadow across their land. Behind them, the barn rose solid, and true no longer just shelter from storms, but testament to love's power to rebuild what was broken. The orchard stretched before them, trees heavy with promise. Each blossom held the seed of fruit to come, just as their first meeting in darkness had contained the seed of their future. Birds called from the branches, their songs mixing with the gentle lowing of cattle and the distant whisper of wind in the highlands. Austin's arms settled around Emma's shoulders, strong and sure. Looking out over their flourishing land, he lifted his voice in gratitude. "What was lost is restored, and more besides." The words rang clear in the morning air, a prayer of thanksgiving. Emma leaned into his embrace, at peace. The leather packet that had once held her father's deed now sat in their trunk, its purpose fulfilled. The land had found its proper guardians, not through force or fear, but through faith and patience. Together they stood framed by morning light, their shadows stretching back into the barn they'd rebuilt with love and community. Apple blossoms continued their gentle dance on the breeze, blessing the land with their promise of sweetness to come in their hearts. They knew that this was more than restoration, it was resurrection. What fear had broken, love had rebuilt stronger. What loneliness had emptied, faith had filled to overflowing. The barn stood as their witness, its solid beams declaring that mercy could transform any storm into shelter, any wanderer into family. Thanks for watching. Stories like this shape us in ways we don't always expect. If something resonated, subscribe. I'm back tomorrow with another one worth hearing.